I unfortunately have interacted with people before who, when I've tried to help them budget or I've tried to help them with their money and finances and stuff, at first they're like, oh yeah, help me, because they think, oh, maybe there's some sort of practical thing that I can offer them. Usually they can take some nugget of information from what I said and practically apply it, no matter how interested or not they are in finances. That's great, that's awesome. But I have helped people before with their budget, and they might take only one or two things that I say and totally discard the rest. And as far as I can tell, it comes down to a couple of things. One of the things that absolutely seems to be a really real thing with younger people especially is a hopelessness. A sense of, well, by the time I'm old, the world's gonna be on fire anyway. Why would I bother? Why even try? Why even put money into retirement? No one cares about climate change. I'm gonna have to deal with the repercussions of it. No one cares about actually fixing homelessness or universal health care. So why would I even bother? I'm just gonna be destitute when I'm old anyway. I'm just gonna have to work till I die anyway. Like, they have such a sense of hopelessness. So then with those folks, I try super hard to say, maybe, but what's a goal that you have? What's a thing that you want to do? And let's look at how many years it could take to get to that. Because if they can see, oh, I've always wanted to go on this trip to, say, Mexico or whatever, and in actuality, I could get there in like 2 years, it opens them up to the possibility of, well, if I can accomplish that goal, maybe I could accomplish a different one that's further out. Well, maybe by the time I'm old, the world will be burning in on fire, but maybe 10 years from now, I could have this. And it helps them to create some sort of a habit that I genuinely hope, later, when it turns out the world didn't completely catch on fire, they can use that habit when maybe they aren't quite as hopeless. Now, it's technically possible the world will catch on fire, but the odds of that happening are not that big, in actuality, like, based on science. But there's going to be more fires, so maybe prepare more in a on the safe side way. That makes sense. But you can still have a goal, and we can still treat it like it's attainable. And so that's what I try to do with people who are struggling with hopelessness. But there's a whole other group that I'll say is also mostly younger people, but sometimes not, who are jaded. It's been really, really hard financially, absolutely. And for them, it's not just that they've given up on ever getting out of that, it's that they've said, screw it to the whole system. Now, admittedly, the system's broken, but they're like not even interested in attempting to work within the system. So they are like, I'm not going to sacrifice my standard of living right now to try to gain something in the future. I'm not going to eat less healthy right now and spend less on my groceries just to pay off that credit card. If they come after me later, whatever. They don't matter to me. What matters to me is I'm just gonna eat healthy. And to a certain degree, eating healthy is an excellent thing, but you can eat healthy without spending quite that much. Like, there can be a middle ground, but they don't want to think about the middle ground because the middle ground means sacrificing more. And they've already sacrificed so much during their life, and they've already sacrificed so much during their adulthood even, that they're just like, screw it, I'm done. I don't care. I want the nicest mattress. I want the car that I want. And if they eventually come and, take it all away, repossess everything, then it's because they're jerks. It's not because there was anything I could have done about that anyway. And so it's a type of hopelessness, but it is almost vindictive. It's almost like I begrudge that it has had to be so hard, and I begrudge that I would have to sacrifice anything at this point to make it less hard. I've seen a woman once, and she had a lot of debt, a lot, and part of the debt she felt really guilty about, really bad about. Like, she genuinely felt like a burden to her husband because when they got married, he didn't have debt and she did. And part of her debt was student loans, and then almost $30,000 in credit card debt. And she genuinely would make these little bursts of attempts at paying toward the credit card debt. She totally had no interest in dealing with the student loans, but she felt like, you know, the credit card debt was a little more her fault. She felt like there's no way around having the student loans. That's what they force people to do. So that's not her fault. But the credit card loans, she technically made choices. And so she would have these spurts of a couple of months where she would make payments toward them, get it down a little bit, and then that would drop off and she would go back to getting more stuff on the credit cards. And so she had this really major up-down movement. And unfortunately, she would get really scared about the debt and would start lashing out. She would start lashing out and get angry because fear was expressed as a frustration, and that turned into anger very quickly. And so her spouse had kind of given up. At first, when they had gotten together, they had made promises about getting rid of the debt and that he wouldn't be shackled with that. And now that he's married to her, it's his debt too. Whether he wanted it to be that way or not, every time they start to make progress on it, it racks back up. And so he's kind of just given up. And so he's hopeless and she's jaded. And it's like, okay, well, you could very easily make $1,000 a month payments if you stop buying certain things each month. And for instance, she kept buying random furniture. She was really big into buying decently expensive furniture. I was like, you can get free furniture if you're really obsessed with furniture, you know, off of like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp or something. You can get cheap furniture, at least that way. Or maybe go to IKEA, and instead of spending $2,100 on this, you know, bed frame, let's go spend like, you know, $300 on the bed frame. That saves you enough that you can put toward the credit cards, and you could consistently do that. And she's like, no, I'm not willing to do that. She genuinely had a problem with most manufacturing and processing and stuff because she felt like they were done with chemicals and that stuff would off-put chemicals into the home. And they did have a kid, so she didn't want any chemicals coming in contact with the kid. Their mattresses were all pure natural, their cushions all pure natural, like everything, because she was avoiding chemicals. So it sounded like a noble thing. It can be a noble thing to not want chemicals to touch your kid. For sure, that's an understandable thing. But financially, she was not in a position to continuously go after that in the way that she was. And every month doing that doesn't make sense, because at a certain point, you've got enough furniture. At a certain point, you've got enough material possessions. You have enough to function, to have your home stuffed with stuff. And yet, it wasn't enough for her, because it was her way of getting back at the system. That she was going to get the top quality item, whether or not people thought she earned enough to deserve that item. That she was gonna have the best product for her family, for her, whether or not people thought she earned enough to deserve that. And so she was very, very aggressive on that stance. And it ended up being that they would not accept any budget help. It can be a hard thing. It can be a really, really hard thing. Watching people's beliefs or their emotions lead them in a direction. All I try to do after a certain point, once I understand that they really are hard stance, not gonna budge, is give them some nuggets of wisdom that hopefully at some point either later they can use, or else it's just a teeny tiny practical thing. For instance, I couldn't help them set up a budget. I really couldn't. But he had completely given up, and I did convince them to, once a month, actually look at their finances. Him to actually look at it, so that he, at least on his side, could make sure all their bills were covered. And it wasn't his responsibility to pay off all her debt, but they needed to make sure that, you know, they didn't have stuff repossessed, like their vehicles or house and stuff. And before, their budgeting was simply, well, I guess it's going well because we still have a roof over our head. And this way, they could at least see where the money was going. And the goal, secretly for me, is the more that they look at where the money's going, then maybe the more they can adjust to the fact that they need to cut back a little. But in actuality, if they're at least looking at it, they and their kid are still going to have a roof over their head. All you can do is try to say, hey, I genuinely, with all my heart, believe this will help you. And hope that they sense your sincerity enough that they consider it at some point. I am always trying to help people come up from the bottom, but sometimes we are all, in certain situations, our own worst enemy. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that I judge that woman. She is absolutely right. The system is broken. And it's not fair. I don't blame her for feeling that way at all. But it is sad to me that she feels that way so strongly she can't act. It is not in any way, shape, or form meant to be me judging the people who are hopeless about the future. Because quite frankly, I spent a huge portion of my life, almost all of it, in that boat where I felt hopeless. I felt like the future was pointless. Depression is not kind at all. And it's sad how much depression can make you feel like there just really is no option. Even if someone is trying to hand you one, you don't have the capacity to take it. I have tremendous compassion for people who are in these situations. And if you are in those situations, please, please try to take some deep breaths and step back and recognize that as much as what you're saying is true, and as much as your feelings are valid, you're also hindering yourself from changing that circumstance. You can't change the external factors of things that are beyond your control, like that the system is broken. But there are ways that even a poor person can try to work within the system to be less poor. And it sucks. It sucks that it's that hard. It's not fair, for sure, but it's also not hopeless. And it is something that you can do. If you're willing to let go of just a little bit now, you can have way more later. It's just delayed gratification, but on a different scale. If you get rid of debt payments, if you get rid of paying off a credit card bill or whatever it is, what I always try to tell people is once that's gone, from that point forward, you have that much more a month. And if you could go to your job and ask for that kind of a raise, you'd be thrilled. But you don't need an employer to give you that kind of a raise. You could give it to yourself. But it does mean cutting back right now temporarily. It does mean maybe 2-4 years of holding back. But once those years are done, you just gave yourself that much of a raise. You just increased how much you have to work with for the rest of your life, as long as you don't go back into debt. Instead of losing $1,000 a month paying off that credit card, you literally would just have $1,000 extra a month to, oh my gosh, what do I even do with it? Like, that's amazing. $1,000. Oh my gosh. $1,000, you could put part of it toward investing. You could put part of it toward, setting up charitable giving or something. You could set up part of it toward traveling. $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. And the thing is if you're paying off the credit card, you're paying taxes on the money you're paying the credit card off with. So you're getting double whammied. And now you're not getting double whammied. There's no interest on this $1,000 a month that you're now handed. You just pay taxes. That's it. There's no interest on it. It's just $1,000 that's yours a month. If you can somehow focus on that, focus on how much you're gonna gain. There are people who invest in the stock market and do like day trading and all that kind of stuff. And man, if they could get $1,000 a month increase on their profit off of nothing, they would be thrilled. They would be, oh my gosh, I am investing in that right this second. And you can do it by just investing in yourself. And it means temporarily accepting that things will be more challenging, but it is temporary. It is kind of nuts to me how many people I meet who have debt who do not know when their debt will be done. They have no idea. And so it's such an important thing to say, you know what? There is an end date. This is not for forever. If I pay this much a month and my interest is this much a month, when will this be gone? There are calculators online that you can look at that are free. You literally just Google it. Do it. Know when it stops. Because when it stops, the next month after that is going to be such a relief. The next month after that, celebrate a little bit. You deserve it. You deserve to be proud of yourself for getting to that point. Set a date with yourself. You and your, family, you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, 6 years from now. All right, we're setting a date. We are all going out to dinner at our favorite place 1 month after this day, because this is the day the debt stops. 6 years from now. One of them will be in college, but you know what? They're gonna come back for that celebration. And you're gonna have a big family dinner. Because then 1 month after that, you're gonna have the money to pay for the dinner without going into debt. And that's gonna feel so freaking good. No more of the stress that comes from debt. No more people trying to hound you to pay it back. No more worrying about, oh, are they gonna repossess stuff? Are they gonna take stuff away? It's just not even a thing anymore. Debt is crushing. It is mentally and emotionally and financially crushing. When paying off debt, I always say, because the math works out for it better, pay off the thing with the highest interest first. If you have more than one set of debt, just do that. Once you are done with the debt, all of that money is now just part of your budget. It can be allocated however you want. And you can make a life that's filled with way more, because not only do you have the financial freedom to do so, but you also have the mental and emotional energy to do so. Debt is like a leech. It saps all your energy. When you get into debt in more than one way and you pay off one of them, you can celebrate that too. You will still have more money than you thought you did, but part of that quote-unquote freed up money needs to go toward paying off the other debts. Don't get so excited that you're completely neglecting to add on to how much you get rid of the other ones. Once you get rid of something, it's like compounding interest at that point, because you have more money spare to get rid of the next debt, so the next debt gets rid of faster. And it charges less interest because you got rid of the one with the most interest first, so it accrues interest slower. So between paying it off faster and accruing interest slower, it's less hard. The first one is going to be the hardest one. It is also the hardest one because you're setting up the habit when you haven't been doing that. It is the hardest one because it is starting at the start. And at the start, The racetrack looks the longest. At the start, the race is the most daunting. But the more you start running along the track, the less there is to go, and the more it feels like I can do it. Give yourself a real chance. Don't say, oh, this will never happen. That is such a dooming yourself statement. That is a statement that has finality to it. There are no other options. Say, this is like unlikely. If you have to say a percentage and the percentage is super low, do it. Say, you know what, there's only like 5% chance. At least be honest with yourself enough to say, there's some kind of chance. Don't use language with yourself that says there's no option. You can do it. Because in the long run, the debt doesn't matter. You matter. And if your debt is over 10K, there are programs to help. There are even government-based programs to help reduce debt payments, to reduce how much you have to pay. If you are over 30,000 in debt, there are even more programs. So please, please know what you're eligible for if your debt is tremendous. Please don't be hopeless. You can do it.